and welcome everybody. My name is Adriano. We are going to look at 3 points basically. So the fact that according to evolutionary psychology and also Buddhism, we don't see the world clearly. And hence, this brings suffering. We suffer because we don't see the world clearly. And then we're going to discuss a bit what are the solutions, what can we do about that. So first, in a bit broader lines, I will try to explain a bit and in very simple terms what evolutionary psychology is about. Basically, it's about the study of the human brain, of the human mind, which try to understand how it makes its connections, how it works, and also investigating, because evolutionary psychology means to investigate in the human brain evolution, how the human brain was designed, was shaped, was developed throughout thousands and thousands of years for many goals. First, for survival, for adapting to the changing of circumstances, to the environment that we're living in. But then through this process, we could see that sometimes our brain can mislead us, can lead us astray from what is real perception, away from truth and away from reality. Also, it goes and investigates a bit on how the brain cope with the sudden changes that in the environment that we live in. So we have to admit that our cities, our societies, and the way we live in today has changed so much. It's just thinking about the last 100 years, and before, or maybe a bit before Industrial Revolution, that how things has changed. So cities has grown, and we live now in a globalized world, internet, office jobs, and so on. It's like, and the evolution of the brain, it happens in a much slower pace. It's like we would be more prepared to live in the times of our ancestors, in the times of our hunter-gatherer. So it's like we are prepared for more this environment of living in tribes or in small groups, and you have to hunt for the meals and stuff. But in this process of evolution, we see that we have evolutionary psychology points out there is this possibility of our brains to be deluded, which has happened, as Michael was saying, about this process of natural selection. So sometimes some genes that are good the genes that pass on to the next generation, so the next generation can survive and thrive. Sometimes those genes offer a clear perception, which is most of the time what happens. So happy days. So clear perception will be favored. But however, if a gene gets to the next generation, which favoring an unclear perception, so then this biased, this unclear view of reality will be favored, will be passed on, and you have consequences on that. So we are going to look at a few examples when unclear perception is a good thing for us and when it's not so good, right? So I'll go for a few simple examples here. Imagine that you're adventurous. So you are going to your trip to the Amazon rainforest, right? You're on a trip to the heart of the Amazon jungle, and to enjoy a true experience in a natural habitat that you wouldn't be able to experience in Ireland, or even probably in whole of Europe. But you're not going your own, right? You've taken all your recommendations with you, and you are well prepared, well suited. You have all your outfit, your boots, your thick cargo trousers. Like even a knife cannot go through this this very thick fabric that you got. But despite of that, despite of all this preparation, there is this small chance that you might have a not very nice encounter with a snake. Very good. So as an Irish person, you wouldn't have a clue how to deal with that, right? Because as far as I know, all the snakes are gone since St. Patrick's cast them away, right? More than, I don't know, 1,000 years ago, something like that. So, okay, you're there, you're on your journey, and walking happily there, and then in the middle of the forest, and suddenly you hear some rustling in the bushes. You look to your side, like you're suspicious, you don't see anything, you just keep going. You're suspicious, you're meandering of what might be, and then again, a few steps ahead, you hear the same noise, and then something darts off from the trees. You scream, you run off, you're terrified. So your body just triggered this immediate reaction of fight and flight mode. So for you, when you look back, you clearly saw like a rattlesnake or a coral snake. I know, for me, coral snakes were the ones that, in my memories, the toxic ones. But like as an Irish person, you wouldn't know anyway. So you saw a snake, and there's a danger. So but in reality, all the odds to say there was simply like a small lizard, or some other small insect or anything. You in pretty much all cases, you are just being deceived by your perception. But this sort of deception is a good thing. It's a good thing for survival, because imagine that it was really like a poisonous, toxic snake, and you were prepared. You run away, so you did what you need to do to save your skin and to run away from that. So although it's like one, I don't know, just a magic number here, like 1% of being a really harmful snake, but 99% you just waste your time and your effort, and you just carried away for nothing. But if there was this slightly chance of 1%, you were prepared. You're there, So that's one example that I can relate to that. Another simple one is more close to our reality here. You're just simply trying to cross the road, or cross to the other side of the road in a very busy morning. So it's Monday morning, you don't have the traffic light close. You just have to cross the road, cross the cars, and the cars are coming from left and right, and you're in a rush. So you look at the side and look to the other side. But usually what happens is we tend to overestimate the distance, overestimate the speed of the cars coming. So even though there would be enough time for you to cross, you wait, you'll be there. So, I mean, these studies, I'm taking from the book it's called Buddhism is True, from Robert Wright. He's an evolutionary psychologist. I'm not sure if that study works really well in the streets of Dublin, because I think in here people just cross over in front of the cars or darts off, or I don't know. This can be a different reaction from Dublinese, I think. But in this sense as well, in this simple example, overestimating as well is a good thing. It's a good thing for survival. Either you stay in your footpath, or either you run faster than you need to run. You tend to think the car is coming faster, and you're saving your skin. So you're being you're taking the attitude that you need to be taken to survive, right? So I don't know. So maybe in the other, like, hunter-gatherer times, maybe were elephants coming on your way, so people need to run out for elephants. So maybe the case that's I'm not sure. But in summary, so those traits means that we tend to overestimate those threats, and this actually makes us more prudent, more cautious in our actions, right? So because if those traits actually, because having these characteristics actually was good for natural selection, was good for survival, and those traits were passed on to the next generation, right? So it means that these genes that are not favoring true perception and what they're good for us, they were passed on, right? Because the idea is not to favor clear or unclear perception. If you think about natural selection or how that would work, if it favors for the continuation of the species, that will be favored. So in these two examples, we could say that our brain was shaped through the natural selection to actually delude us, right? Not to favor clear perception. Okay, so we look at examples where unclear perception is a good thing for us, but when this is a bad thing. So as we're saying, we live today in an environment that's way more different from the one we're designed for. So, and the evolution of the brain takes thousands and thousands of years, which is in a different pace from the changes in our environment, as I was saying before. And that could trigger certain forms of the biggest problem that we have today in modern times is the anxiety. So, because we have to face and you have to deal with circumstances that we haven't had before. So one simple example that causes anxiety in people is talking in front of 100 people that you never met. Imagine that you live in a tribe, and in a tribe you would know everybody. So, and you would work together, you're gonna hunt together with these people. So there wouldn't be those situations that you need to address an audience that you wouldn't know people there. So today you have also this obligation almost that we need to cause a good first impression when we when you meet new people in a social setting. So, and you have to really impress, and you need to, show in a certain way that people can, really think highly of you. So that's something that was not natural, not something that was kind of weird shape and designed for that. So, and that triggers a lot of, and in reality, this triggers the same mechanism that we were talking about when you saw the snake on the possible snake on your way. That triggers the same mechanisms of fight and flight mode, when in reality there is no need to, right? Because there's different circumstances that you're not prepared for that. So another example is about sleep anxiety. Imagine that you have something important to do the next day, and when you go to sleep, you're thinking about that, and you just awake in the middle of the night, say like, oh gosh, like I have to deliver this project tomorrow, and there's something really important, and if I don't get to sleep, I won't be able to do it. But then you won't be able to sleep because you're just worried about not being able to perform the next day, and then it keeps in this loop. Some people can, and you're not able to go back to sleep. Some people can get even sick before a talk due to an anxiety crisis. So just to give you an example, like I just had one myself before this talk. So no, just kidding there. So yeah, another example there is throughout these times of COVID pandemic times is sure pretty much all of us experience something like that, but something that I can relate in my closer memories in especially at Christmas time, for instance, that we have plenty of food and plenty of, especially desserts, sweets, that's everywhere. I don't know, in the pantry, I don't know where they're coming from, but they're everywhere in your press. And it's really easy to go and reach another one, and you just can't help keep going and keep grabbing the next cookie, sweet, pastry, dessert, whatever it suits you until it's gone. And if you think about that, and you do that unconsciously, you just keep reaching to the next one without reflecting, without stopping it. Do I really feel like eating the next pastry or the next sweet? Sometimes not, but we just keep going, right? And when you realize the thing is over, all your roses box or selection is gone, right? So, but if you think about in terms of the example that I mentioned before, and to link to that, we were prepared to live in as in this theory, our brain is shaped to live in a hunter-gathering environment. In a hunter-gathering environment, you wouldn't have loads of food available, like at any time, right? So imagine if you're living at that time and you have like a banquet in front of you, loads of food, you're gonna feast on that because you wouldn't know when will be the next meal available, right? So we just eat and indulge in eating as much as we can because the next one, you have to hunt for the next one. So better save now. As also another thing about interesting about especially sweets is because as human beings, we eat meat, fruits, vegetables. We are omnivorous, right? Another sign that a fruit, for instance, when you pick a fruit, and if the fruit is good for consumption, is actually based on how sweet it is. A sweet fruit, like it triggers your brain that's okay for consumption. It's ripe and it's proper for you to eat. If it's sour or bitter, or it isn't. So something that in our brain is kind of designed as well to say like sweet is good, and then which is fine in the context that in the context of our ancestors now, right? But the problem is in our environment that we live today, where we have just talking about so far what evolutionary psychology and the problems that we see that it brings to us. But okay, so what Buddhism has to do with all of that? What the Buddha's teachings have to relate to all of that? As Michael was saying just a bit earlier before, Buddhism as well tries to understand, as evolutionary psychology, the human mind, try to understand the human condition. And Buddha, in the early stage, realized that suffering is an essential part of life. So one element that really stands out in the doctrine of Buddhism, so we're going to see in more detail, are the Four Noble Truths. And the first one is the realization that suffering exists. Or sometimes we can translate a bit different, dissatisfaction or even unsatisfactoriness. The idea that we are not content, happy, and we're just looking and thirst for the next thing. And the second one, the second noble truth, it's about try to understand what causes that condition, that situation, which can simply, in simple lines, can be translated as desire or attachment as well. So here we see that this idea, this dynamic of we being attracted to these pleasures, to the sensory pleasures that, if you think about, they end up being quite short-lived and quite fleeting at best. And this idea is clearly expressed in Buddhist teachings. So we tend to think that we will be better off when we get our desires fulfilled, right? We tend to think, just give a simple examples. That would be way better off when finally we get that desired promotion at work, the new role that we're really aiming for and striving to get. We'll be in nirvana when we get there. Or when we get the new car, the newest shiny SUV that we're crazy about. Or sometimes even simpler stuff, just maybe the next pint that you'll be able to drink when the pubs are open, but we just put a lot of emphasis, a lot of effort in the pleasure that you're gonna get when we had this desired fulfilled. But it's harder to actually look and reflect on all the cons or all the headaches that we might get when you get this desires fulfilled. So for these examples, we can mention on we tend to overlook the extra responsibility that you're gonna have in this new role at work, or the more management stuff that you need to deal with, or more meetings and meetings and meetings that you're gonna have with this new role, for instance. I don't know. For the car, the extra money that you have to pay, to chip in for insurance, for petrol, for tax, and so on. And when talking in the context of overeating, all the overweight that we can carry, and problems, health problems, and so on. The principle is that we tend to overestimate this state of bliss that we're gonna get once we reach that next thing that we desire. So, according to evolutionary psychology, means that we're not designed to see the truth, to see the world clearly, right? And according to Buddhism, that deception can bring us suffering. So just to tie how this process of evolution happened, if you put ourselves in this evolutionary designer, right, and try to think why we have these principles in us, right? So as animals and humans and animals as well, we are pleasure-seeking creatures. So we tend to seek things that give us pleasure, and this pleasure should not last forever. Should be short-lived, because otherwise you wouldn't seek it again. So the simplest example is about food, right? So if you eat, you have your nicest meal ever, and you're really satisfied, and say like, okay, done, I don't need to eat anymore. Is that true? Is that something that would be good for survival? No, you need to go, and next day and morning, afternoon, 3 times, 4 times, depends on people more, we need to eat again, right? And the thing is, the animal brain, like in our brain as well, for sure, we tend to focus much more in the pleasure, in the outcome that this, when you achieve the next thing, will bring, than reflecting on how short-lived or the consequence that we'll get, that we'll have when you get this thing. So Buddha said, so how pleasure is really fleeting, is really short-lived, and sometimes, and you reach that stage, and you leave dissatisfied, because it goes and like smoke, it goes and evaporates and just and goes away, but then you have this circle of trying again and searching for the next thing and searching for more pleasure, right? So just to see that in simple terms and in action, so it'd be more even closer to us, I'm going to propose like a short, a small thought experiment to imagine that you are in your kitchen, right? And you have a kitchen table in front of you, and in there, on the table, you have your favorite Your favorite pastry, your favorite drink, your favorite dessert, you choose. You have it there. You have in your table, so something that you're really craving for, and but it's there. You have a bit of distance from it, right? Before getting too close, you reflect on the fact that the pleasure that you're gonna get, that you're gonna gain from eating it or drinking it, is very fleeting. It's almost like illusion. You have it, so and that's gone. So why have so much expectations on having it, right? Okay, so you reflect on that. As you're reflecting on this, you go there, you pick the item, your pastry or your drink or your dessert or whatever it is, and imagine that you lift and you bring close to your face, very close to your mouth, and you're just looking at that, you're staring at it for just a few seconds. Do you feel that you're getting more conscious of that illusion? Do you feel that the cravings that you have for eating or drinking, it goes away? So I don't know for you, but for me, it doesn't work at all like that. I just eat and drink, and that's done. So what it is just that the fact that we know that fulfilling this pleasure, this desire, or whatever it is, it doesn't help you. It doesn't make things easier or better. Actually, it can make things worse, because actually it adds this idea of guilt, because you know that you shouldn't eat. I mean, it's fine to eat one or two, but I don't know, you shouldn't overeat. You shouldn't overdrink, and then you have consequences the next day for sure. That's illusion, that's pointless, but you keep falling in the same trap. The psychology gives a name for that, called that you're stuck in the hedonic treadmill, right? Because there's a treadmill. It's like in the circle that you just keep you running and actually not leading you anywhere. So to conclude in terms of evolutionary psychology, I understand that it brings the worst of both worlds. So we are aware of the problem, we're aware of our desires being an illusion, but you cannot do anything. You can't prevent being ruled by them. There's a saying from a Tibetan Buddhist teacher about that. I'm gonna read that. Ultimately, happiness comes down to choosing between the discomfort of being aware of your mental afflictions and the discomfort of being ruled by them. I'll read it again, because ultimately, happiness comes down to choosing between the discomfort of being aware of our mental afflictions and the discomfort of being ruled by them. So fair enough. So natural selection gives us a rational explanation of how this engine, this mechanism works, but it does not present any solution, any answer. So what can we do about it? How can we be in control of that? How can we master that, those cravings or these instincts, right? So maybe Buddhism has a better say on this. I'm gonna look back to the first and second noble truths we mentioned there. So the first one, we are talking about this human condition of dissatisfaction or unsatisfactoriness. They translate sometimes, but it can be suffering as well. So we are in this condition of suffering, and we are never satisfied with what we have and what we got. And the second is try to understand the cause of that. So what actually causes suffering, which we can be translated desire, that we desire, and that we have attachments to things, right? And then he proceeds for the third noble truth, and he will talk about the end of suffering. So that will be reaching the state of overcoming, of transcending the condition of suffering, which is reaching enlightenment or reaching nirvana, as you probably heard about. So, but I mean, we as everybody, we are really far away from that. So you're dealing with simple day-to-day stuff. We're really far from that condition. But even then, Buddha brings in his quest to overcome suffering, to find a way to transcend suffering, and he brings us like a path, a way to conquer that, a way out of this condition. And this path is described in more detail in the fourth noble truth, which is also well known as Noble Eightfold Path. Eightfold because it talks about 8 steps or 8 characteristics that are supposedly need to be worked on together. It's not something that you do here, a bit of one thing here and you fulfill one step and then you go to the next one and you go to the next one. No, they are all, as Mike was saying in his first talk, we all interconnected. So this path is proposed to overcome the human condition of pain, of suffering, that evolutionary psychology really points out that's there, but doesn't bring any idea or any solution to the problem. Sorry. So first, you're going to take a look at right attention. So he explains what right attention is. But first, we start simply with attention. So what is attention? Just simply the act of being present, of being in here and now, to be present in the moment we are living, we are experiencing, to have a bit of awareness of ourselves and to connect to our environment, to know what's going on around us. So when we start to be able to do that, to be present in the moment, we start to gain a bit of distance from our own thoughts, our own desires, our own feelings. We are able not to identify, not to attach ourselves too much with for instance, the desire for eating this pastry, for instance, that we are talking about, or the desire to strive and to get this promotion at work. Some other examples, not to identify too much with the anger or a feeling that you might have towards like a colleague at work, for instance, that have offended you, upset you, or wronged you in some reason, in some way, and you want to pay back, for instance. So at least you start to gain a bit of awareness, right, of those thoughts or those emotions, what's happening inside you, and you start to be a bit less, influenced by those emotions and feelings, which means that we are no longer those desires and emotions. I'm not my craving for the pastry. I'm not the anger I'm feeling towards my colleague or annoyance, right? So because then we have a different perspective. We start to be the individual that actually experience those emotions, experience cravings or anger or whatever it is, right? So we get a bit of distance. We're less influenced by them. You can see from a different perspective. And as a result of this process, we start to be less led or less influenced by those external circumstances that triggered those feelings in the first place. So we're able to think, oh, maybe like I'm upset with this colleague, but maybe he doesn't have a clue that he has offended me or upset me, or you look at things with a different perspective, a different angle, right? For Buddha, right attention goes a bit beyond that. For him is the virtue of being really fully present on what you're doing, what you're engaging in action, what you're dedicating yourself with. And then when you get this state of mind, you have more clarity, you have more purpose on what you're doing. And then he shifts to right perception or right view. And that's the interesting point, because what he mentions here, he tries to shift the focus of perceiving the world or perceiving reality, as we mentioned in all these examples of how perception can deceive us, right? And instead of perceiving the world from the perspective of the circumstances or things that are happening to you, you shift the perspective to perceive reality from within, from inside out. The idea is, he brings the idea of reaching one's own center. So when you are in a situation that you are in more equilibrium, you're calmer, you breathe in, and you can even say that you're, in this case, you'll be able to reach something that is higher in yourself, that's more elevated. And we can call this consciousness. You can call it higher self. It's a state of mind that is more, that you are centered, that you are yourself. Then we go to right thought, when we are able to leave behind all this noise of the external circumstances, of our more noise of especially our emotions and our thoughts that can be really loud and can really disturb our peace and tranquility, and really throws us off center, right? When right thought means you're able to, for sure, that's a process, but it's eventually is the idea of able to master those thoughts and have clarity of mind. And then he goes on talking about right concentration, which is also related to reaching this more elevated state of mind. But then is not only reaching this state of mind for the sake of it, but then we start to think about engaging into action from this point of view. From this point of view, from this kind of inner perspective, you'll be able to we'll be able to engage in action, to take the best course of action in that particular situation. So imagine that when if you are in that state of mind, you wouldn't be you would take the right decision if it's fair, it's okay or not to eat the pastry, or how you're going to react to the anger that you're feeling towards your colleague, or any situations that you can think of. If you're in this state of mind, it brings you a completely different perspective of how you should act, right? And then he goes about explaining on human behaviors and human actions, which is simply a consequence of being in this more centered state of mind. When we shift the orientation or perspective that we have to inward, right? And then we talk about right action, which is act according, listening to our own consciousness, because deep down, like, we know what we need to do in most of situations that we face in life. We know how to act appropriately. And right action means acting sometimes when it's against what I like, what I dislike. It's regardless of liking and disliking. It's acting because that's the right thing to do. It's acting based on what's not more comfortable, not more suitable, but it's acting because that's the right thing. And then he goes as well for right speech, when we know when to talk, when and not to talk, when to be silent, and to say truth, to be kind with people, to be kind with words, to be kind with words when we relate to others, but also with ourselves as well. The thoughts that we have, the words that we have for ourselves. And always honestly, which also links well with the next step, which is having a right means of living. So, as you know, like we're not, that's, it seems that's really far of our reality, be able to do all those things, right? But but it's not. Um, we are able to do that step by step, right? To reach to be able to reach our center. Our center means um, when you are in that place that you're more serene, that you're more calm, that you're more in equilibrium, that you're more in harmony, right? With yourself, with others, with your environment, right? And from that point of view, you're able to act in the world. And then you start acting it more justly, more kindly. But this to take this step requires effort. According to Buddha, the next step, right effort. And that's not something that just happened by chance. It happens through effort, right? We need, and there's a constant practice. It's a practice for life. We try. If we don't engage in action, we don't learn. So we learn by practicing, we learn by doing, we learn by reflecting, we learning by looking back and observing ourselves in action, and reflecting after we act, and correcting ourselves and correcting our own mistakes, right? And in this process, we engage in this process of correcting ourselves with kindness, with generosity towards others, but especially towards ourselves, not to be harsh towards ourselves, to be really kind and patient, and know that is a process, that the process for life. And that it really opens up a different perspective how we can view and experience life. To conclude, evolutionary psychology, as I mentioned, brings us this problem, this issue that, like, our brains, our instincts can be, say, shaped, like designed to favor sometimes unclear perception. So we don't see the world clearly. But that's done for good, with good intentions. So we're able to go and perpetuate the species, to survive, to thrive in our environment. But then there are two things. One, we live in an environment today that's much different from the ones our ancestors in the hunter-gathering times were lived in. So, and then brings a lot of new situations and problems that we need to face that they didn't, right? And then this trigger, as I say, like this fight or flight mode, and it makes us suffer, and brings an anxiety and unnecessary suffering. But also, we have ingrained in us this mechanism of really searching for pleasure, searching for the next thing, or the next thing. And when you look back, that actually leaves a void, or leaves us dissatisfied. But we can't help it. You just keep going in the same mechanism, and you never step back and reflect. You just keep going and pursuing the next thing, more pleasure. So really, it's something that, we all know, that's very well documented in psychology. So our capitalist and consumerist society use those tricks of our brains, of our psychology to sell everything that they want to, right? So that's the base of how we are, what really structures our society today. And Buddhism has really gone through these same issues, but way before evolutionary psychology, which is quite recent. So it's more than 2,000 years before, was looking into that and the idea of suffering, the problem of human condition, and trying to understand the inner cause of this condition. But also, and contrary of evolutionary psychology, which brings only the problem, it brings you like a path. Like, it's not a formula, something that you just go with simple steps, do and apply, and you're done, you're sorted. It's not, but it's a path that we can choose to walk. And the start and the first step that we do, the first step that it brings about to sort this issue, to sort this dilemma, is really based on what we identify ourselves with. How do we recognize ourselves? How do we see ourselves? Do we really identify ourselves only with our instincts, our really fleeting, changing instincts, desires, thoughts, and we simply just go with the flow, we just follow the wings of any desires that we happen to have? Or we try to go a bit beyond that. We try to get a bit of detachment and get a bit of distance from all these impulses, from these immediate desires and emotions they're flooding us. Were you able to shift towards a more inwards, a more inner perspective? And in a sense that we are able to be more centered, more balanced, more elevated. And when, from this point of view, from this perspective, you will be able to act in the world in a way more justly, you can be more generous, more kind, especially to ourselves, but to others, and really act according to our consciousness, according to the values and principles that we think that we believe, right? I will be able to take the step to engage in action, to learn, right? Because that's a continuous process of trying and learning, error and trying and correcting oneself. But then engaging in this action with kindness, with generosity, with compassion for ourselves and for others,